I still remember the exact moment when everything changed. It was a Tuesday morning in Denver, and I was watching my assistant Casey Brooks being completely ignored by our biggest client. What happened next would expose the ugly truth about respect, recognition, and the power of speaking up. My name is Patricia Wright, and I run a boutique consulting firm specializing in organizational psychology. For 3 years, Casey had been my right hand, my secret weapon, the person who made every project shine. She was brilliant, Harvard-educated, and had a gift for reading people that bordered on supernatural. But she was also young, soft-spoken, and black in an industry dominated by older white executives. The Mountain View corporate retreat was supposed to be our biggest breakthrough. We'd landed Gabriel Collins, CEO of Denver's largest tech startup, as our premier client. The contract was worth 6 figures, and success here would open doors we'd only dreamed of. I'd brought Casey because she'd done most of the research, developed the psychological profiles, and created the innovative team-building exercises that had impressed Gabriel during our pitch. But from the moment we walked into the luxury resort nestled in the Rocky Mountains, I watched Casey become invisible. The other consultants, mostly men in their 50s, spoke over her during meetings. When she presented ideas, they were met with polite nods and quick topic changes. When I presented the same ideas moments later, suddenly they were brilliant insights worth discussing. Gabriel himself was the worst offender. Despite Casey's impressive credentials and obvious expertise, he consistently directed questions to me, even when Casey was mid-sentence. During our first workshop, when Casey suggested a breakthrough exercise on unconscious bias, Gabriel actually laughed and said, "That's cute, but let's focus on real business solutions." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks as I watched Casey's face fall. She recovered quickly, professionally, but I saw the hurt flash across her eyes. This was exactly the kind of behavior our program was designed to address. Yet here we were, living it in real time. By the end of day 1, Casey had retreated into herself. She sat quietly in meetings, took notes diligently, but the spark that made her exceptional was dimming. I tried to create opportunities for her to shine, but every attempt was met with the same dismissive attitude from Gabriel and his team. That night, as snow began to fall outside our mountain lodge, I found Casey on the balcony of her room, staring out at the peaks. "I don't think I should be here," she said quietly. "Maybe you should handle the rest of the retreat alone. Casey, you're the heart of this program," I told her. "Without you, we're just another corporate consulting firm spouting generic advice." She turned to face me, and I saw something in her expression I'd never seen before. Defeat. "Patricia, they don't see me. They don't hear me. How can I help them recognize unconscious bias when I'm living proof of it?" I didn't have an answer that night, but I knew that what happened over the next 2 days would either break Casey's spirit completely or prove to everyone in that room why she belonged at the top of our industry. The next morning brought a crisis that would change everything. We were in the middle of our leadership dynamics workshop when Gabriel's phone rang. He stepped outside to take the call, returning 15 minutes later with a face pale as the snow-covered mountains surrounding us. "We have a problem," he announced to the room. That was our board chairman. Our biggest client, Morrison Industries, just pulled their contract. They're claiming our company culture is toxic and unwelcoming to diverse talent. They're threatening to go public with their concerns. The room erupted in concerned murmurs. Morrison Industries represented 30% of Gabriel's company's revenue. Losing them would be devastating, but the public relations nightmare could destroy them entirely. "This is exactly why we need your program," Gabriel said, turning to me with desperation in his eyes. "But we need solutions now, not theoretical frameworks. How do we fix this?" I was about to respond when Casey stood up. Something had shifted in her overnight. The quiet deference was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence that commanded attention. "Mr. Collins," she said, her voice clear and steady. "May I ask you a question?" Gabriel nodded, though I could see his impatience. "In the 3 years since you've been CEO, how many senior executives have you hired?" 12, Gabriel answered. "And how many of those were women or people of color?" Gabriel's face reddened. "I don't see how that's relevant. We hire the best candidates." "I'm sure you believe that," Casey continued, pulling out her tablet. "But let me share something with you. Yesterday, you interrupted me 14 times during our sessions. You interrupted Patricia twice. When I suggested the unconscious bias exercise, you called it cute. When she suggested the same exercise 30 minutes later, you said it was innovative thinking. The room fell silent. I watched Gabriel's expression shift from annoyance to uncomfortable recognition. This morning, you asked me to get coffee for the group. You haven't asked any of the male consultants to do that. You've directed 89% of your questions to Patricia, despite the fact that I've been answering from the data I compiled. Casey walked to the whiteboard and began writing. Morrison Industries isn't just your client. They're also my former employer. I worked there for 2 years before joining Patricia's firm. I left because of exactly the same patterns I'm seeing here. Gabriel's jaw dropped. You worked at Morrison? I was their youngest VP ever, Casey said calmly. I also led the team that identified the cultural issues they're now citing as reasons for dropping your contract. The same issues that made me leave. The same issues that are playing out in this room right now. She turned to face the entire group. You want to know how to fix this? Start by seeing the expertise that's already in front of you. Stop making assumptions about who belongs in the room based on how they look or sound. And recognize that the person you've been dismissing for 2 days might be the key to solving your biggest problem. The silence was deafening. Gabriel stared at Casey as if seeing her for the first time, which in many ways he was. What did you do at Morrison? He asked quietly. I designed their diversity and inclusion program, Casey replied. The same program that's now being used as a model by Fortune 500 companies across the country. The same program that could have prevented the situation you're facing today. I watched Gabriel's face cycle through emotions. Shock, embarrassment, and then something that looked like hope. Would you be willing to consult on our Morrison situation? Casey looked at me, and I nodded encouragingly. Mr. Collins, she said, I've been trying to consult on it since we arrived. The question is, are you ready to listen? What happened next was unlike anything I'd seen in 15 years of consulting. Gabriel didn't just listen to Casey. He hung on her every word. It was as if someone had flipped a switch, and suddenly he could see what had been invisible to him before. Casey pulled up a presentation on her laptop, one I'd never seen before. I've been tracking your company's patterns since we took this contract, she explained. Not just the obvious metrics, but the subtle behavioral indicators that predict long-term cultural problems. She clicked to a slide showing communication patterns. In your leadership meetings, ideas from women are interrupted 67% more often than ideas from men. When those same ideas are later repeated by male colleagues, they're implemented 43% of the time. Your female employees have a 78% higher turnover rate in their first 2 years. Gabriel's team members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. These weren't abstract statistics. They were looking at their own behavior mapped out in stark detail. This isn't about sensitivity training or political correctness, Casey continued. This is about recognizing talent and creating an environment where your best ideas can surface, regardless of where they come from. She clicked to another slide. Morrison Industries didn't just leave because of discrimination complaints. They left because your company culture was preventing you from delivering innovative solutions. When you consistently dismiss or overlook contributions from diverse team members, you create an echo chamber that kills creativity and problem solving. I watched Gabriel's marketing director, Michelle Morales, lean forward with interest. She was one of only 2 women on his executive team, and I could see recognition dawning in her eyes. Casey, Michelle said, what you're describing, it explains why our brainstorming sessions feel so stale. We keep arriving at the same solutions because we're only hearing from the same voices. Exactly, Casey replied. And it's not just about gender or race. It's about cognitive diversity, different perspectives, varied experiences. When you create a culture where only certain types of people feel comfortable contributing, you're literally limiting your company's intellectual capacity. Over the next several hours, Casey led the group through a series of exercises that I'd never seen before. She had Gabriel's team analyze their own meeting dynamics, track their communication patterns, and confront the gap between their stated values and their actual behavior. The breakthrough came when Gabriel himself admitted to the group that he'd been making assumptions about Casey based on her age and appearance. I've been in tech for 20 years, he said, and I've developed unconscious shortcuts about who looks like a leader. I realize now that those shortcuts have been costing me talent and insights. Casey nodded appreciatively. That's the first step. Recognition. But awareness alone isn't enough. We need to build new systems that interrupt these patterns before they become problems. She spent the remainder of the afternoon walking Gabriel's team through practical strategies, structured meeting protocols that ensure equal speaking time, blind review processes for evaluating ideas, and accountability metrics that track inclusion alongside performance. But the real transformation happened during our evening wrap-up session. Gabriel stood before the group and did something I'd never seen a CEO do in public. "I owe Casey an apology," he said. "Not just for how I've treated her during this retreat, but for what my behavior represents. I've been so focused on what I expected expertise to look like that I missed the actual expertise sitting right in front of me." He turned to Casey. "I've learned more from you in the past 2 days than from any consultant I've ever worked with. Not just about diversity and inclusion, but about leadership, about recognizing talent, about creating environments where everyone can do their best work." Casey smiled, but there was something different in her expression now. This wasn't the grateful relief I expected. This was quiet confidence, the look of someone who had proven her worth and knew it. "Thank you, Mr. Collins," she said. "But I hope you understand that this isn't just about apologizing to me. It's about creating systems that ensure you don't make these mistakes with the next Casey who walks through your door." The final day of the retreat brought a surprise that none of us saw coming. Gabriel opened the morning session with an announcement that left everyone speechless. "I've been on the phone with Morrison Industries since 6 a.m., he said. "I explained what we've learned here, what we're implementing, and who's been leading our cultural transformation. They want to meet with our consulting team next week to discuss reinstating their contract." The room buzzed with excitement, but Gabriel held up his hand. "There's more. They specifically asked to meet with Casey. They want her to lead the assessment of our changes and advise on the implementation." I felt a surge of pride watching Casey receive the recognition she deserved. But what happened next truly surprised me. "Mr. Collins," Casey said, standing up, "I appreciate the opportunity, but I need to be clear about something. I'm not your diversity hire or your cultural band-aid. I'm a strategic consultant with expertise in organizational psychology, leadership development, and systems change. If Morrison Industries wants to work with me, it needs to be because they value my expertise, not because I represent good optics." The room fell silent. I held my breath, wondering if Casey was pushing too hard, too fast. Gabriel smiled, and I realized he was beginning to understand the deeper lesson. "You're absolutely right. Let me rephrase. Morrison Industries wants to work with you because word has spread about your innovative approach to cultural transformation. They've been tracking your work since you left, and they want to bring you in as the lead consultant on their expansion project." Casey's eyebrows rose. "Their expansion project?" "They're opening offices in 5 new cities," Gabriel explained. "They need someone who can help them build inclusive cultures from the ground up, not fix problems after they've already developed. They want to contract with Patricia's firm, with you as the lead consultant." I watched Casey process this information. This wasn't just recognition. This was the kind of career-defining opportunity that could transform her from an overlooked assistant into an industry leader. "What do you think, Patricia?" Casey asked, turning to me. I felt a moment of panic. Casey had outgrown her role as my assistant months ago, but I'd been too comfortable with our arrangement to acknowledge it. Now, I had to choose between holding her back and helping her soar. "I think," I said carefully, "that you should take the lead on this project, and I think it's time we restructured our partnership to reflect what you actually contribute to this firm." Casey's eyes widened. "Partnership?" "Equal partnership," I confirmed. "You've been doing senior consultant work at assistant pay for too long. It's time our business structure reflected your actual value." The room erupted in applause, but I was focused on Casey's face. I saw tears in her eyes, but also something else. Determination, excitement, and a quiet confidence that had been building throughout the retreat. Over the following weeks, Casey led the Morrison Industries project with a skill and vision that impressed everyone involved. The contract was not only reinstated but expanded to include 3 additional companies that Morrison recommended. But the real victory wasn't financial. It was watching Casey step into her power, seeing her expertise finally recognized and valued. Our firm grew rapidly, not just because of the new contracts, but because Casey's reputation attracted the kind of clients who valued innovation and authentic leadership. 6 months later, Casey was invited to speak at the National Conference on Organizational Psychology. Her presentation was titled, "The Invisible Expertise: How Organizations Miss Their Best Talent." The audience gave her a standing ovation. As I watched her on that stage, commanding the attention of industry leaders who had once dismissed her, I realized something important. Casey had always been extraordinary. The retreat hadn't transformed her. It had finally revealed her true capabilities to people who had been too biased to see them. That night, as we celebrated her success, Casey raised her glass and said, "To Patricia, who saw me before I saw myself, but I knew the truth." I hadn't seen Casey clearly until I watched her refuse to remain invisible. She had saved herself, and in doing so, she had saved our firm, our clients, and probably dozens of other talented people who would now have the opportunity to work in environments where their expertise was valued from day one. The best part? Gabriel's company never had another Morrison Industries incident. They became known as one of the most innovative and inclusive tech companies in Denver. And whenever other CEOs asked Gabriel for advice on building strong teams, he always said the same thing. Start by listening to the person you think you can ignore. They might be the key to everything.